The FBI tried to move the unconscious SEAL, but the head nurse raised her weapon and refused it. It was 3 in the morning. The hospital ward was quiet. Most patients were sleeping. The only sounds were the soft beeping of monitors and the hum of the overhead lights. Outside the windows, the naval base was dark and still. Inside one corner bay, behind a curtain and guarded by 2 Marines, lay a man most people in that building did not know by name. He was a Navy SEAL. His real identity was classified. His mission, the one that had put him in that bed, was classified too. What was not classified was his condition: traumatic brain injury. 3 broken ribs, shrapnel wounds along his left side. He had been unconscious for 36 hours. He was on a ventilator, which was breathing for him because his body could not do it on its own. The head nurse on duty that night had chosen to take the overnight shift herself. Her name was Commander Delaney. She was 44 years old and had been running that ward for 11 years. Before nursing, she had served as an Army medic. She had done 2 tours in Iraq. She had seen what war does to a human body up close, and she had spent the better part of her adult life trying to undo that damage, one patient at a time. Everyone on the ward knew her. Nobody messed with her, not because she was loud or rude. She was actually very calm, very steady, but because people could tell just by looking at her that she was not someone who could be pushed around. That night, she sat at the nurse's station, reviewing charts, checking in on patients every 15 minutes the way she always did. She had a cup of tea that had gone cold 2 hours ago. She had not noticed. At 3:17 in the morning, the double doors at the end of the ward swung open. 4 men walked in. Dark suits. No white coats, no scrubs, no visitor badges. They walked the way people walk when they are used to walking into rooms and having everyone stop what they are doing. The one in front was the one in charge. He was tall, clean-shaved, with the kind of face that had probably never showed much emotion even on a good day. He held a folder under his arm. He looked around the ward once, found Commander Delaney at the nurse's station, and walked straight toward her. He introduced himself as a special agent from the FBI's counterintelligence division. He placed the folder on the counter in front of her, opened it, and pointed to a document inside. It was a federal court order. He explained, in a voice that was professional and completely flat, that the patient in Bay 7 was being transferred immediately to a federal holding facility. He said the patient was a person of interest in an active national security investigation, and that the transfer had been authorized at the highest levels. He said his team would handle the physical transport. He said it the way someone says something when they believe the conversation is already over. Commander Delaney picked up the document. She read it. She read it all the way through, not skimming, not rushing. Then she set it back down on the counter. She told him no. She did not say it loudly. She did not argue or wave her hands. She just said it plainly, the way a doctor says a diagnosis. She explained that the patient in Bay 7 had elevated pressure on his brain. She explained that he was on a ventilator, and that removing him from that ventilator, even for the time it would take to transport him, would very likely kill him. She said that moving him anywhere in his current condition was not a medical option. She said that if this transfer happened tonight, the FBI would not be bringing a person of interest to a federal facility. They would be transporting a body. The agent looked at her for a moment. Then he said that her medical opinion was noted, but that it was not her call to make. He said the court order superseded her authority. He said his team was going to proceed. 2 of the agents started walking toward Bay 7. Commander Delaney stood up. She stepped in front of them, and then she did something that nobody in that room had expected. She reached to her side and drew her sidearm. She did not raise it. She did not point it at anyone. She held it low, at her side, with her hand around the grip and the muzzle toward the floor, but she held it, and she did not move. The ward went completely silent. Even the junior nurse at the far end of the room stopped moving. The 2 Marines who had been standing guard outside Bay 7 straightened up. They did not draw their weapons, but they stood up fully, and they turned toward the agents, and that said enough. Commander Delaney told the agents calmly that she was invoking medical authority protocol under Naval Command Directive 6200.4. She explained what that meant in plain language. When a patient's life is in immediate danger, the senior medical officer in charge of that patient has the final say over that patient's custody, regardless of who is asking, and regardless of what paper they are holding. She told them that she was the senior medical officer. She told them that the patient in Bay 7 was her patient. and she told them that they were not taking him anywhere. The lead agent told her she was interfering with a federal investigation. He told her that what she was doing could be considered obstruction. He told her she was making a very serious mistake. She looked at him and said that she had done 2 tours in Fallujah. She said she had carried men out of burning vehicles with her bare hands. She said that in all her years of working in military medicine, she had never once lost a patient because of a piece of paper. She said she did not plan to start tonight. Nobody moved for a long moment. Then the lead agent took out his phone and stepped away to make a call. What followed was 90 minutes of phone calls. The FBI agent called his supervisor. His supervisor called the deputy director. Commander Delaney called the commanding officer of the base. The commanding officer called the Surgeon General of the Navy. The Surgeon General called a liaison at the Joint Chiefs. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., people who normally slept through the night were being woken up and asked to make decisions about a situation nobody had planned for. The complication, the thing that made this situation more complicated than anyone had expected, was the identity of the SEAL himself. He was not just any soldier. He was, it turned out, the only surviving witness to an operation that both the military and the FBI had an interest in. Both sides claimed authority over him. Neither side wanted to back down, and in the middle of all of it, there was a man lying unconscious in a hospital bed who could not speak for himself and whose life was, at that very moment, hanging by threads. While the calls were happening, Commander Delaney did not leave the ward. She holstered her weapon. She went and sat in the chair beside the SEAL's bed, a plain plastic chair, the kind of chair that exists in every hospital in the world. She checked his vitals. She adjusted the drip on one of his IV lines. She looked at his face for a while. He looked very young, she thought, even though he probably was not that young. People who have been through hard things often look younger when they are asleep. Like whatever it is they carry finally puts itself down for a little while. One of the younger nurses came and stood near her after a while. She asked Commander Delaney quietly if she was scared. Delaney thought about the question. She said she was not scared of the FBI agents. She said the only thing that had ever truly scared her, in all her years of doing this job, was the idea of failing someone who had trusted her with their life. She said that was the one thing she could not live with. The younger nurse nodded and went back to her station. Delaney stayed in the chair. At 5:44 in the morning, a decision came down. A 3-way call between the FBI Deputy Director, the Surgeon General of the Navy, and a representative from the National Security Council had produced an agreement. The transfer was suspended. The SEAL would remain in the Naval Medical Ward under Commander Delaney's care. The FBI would be permitted supervised access to the ward, but only once the patient was medically stable, and only on a timeline that the medical team determined, not the FBI. The lead agent collected his court order from the nurse's station counter. He did not say anything to Commander Delaney. He did not look at her. He and his team walked out through the double doors and the ward was quiet again. Commander Delaney watched them go. Then she turned back to her charts. 9 days later, the SEAL opened his eyes. It happened early in the morning, just before sunrise. The way a lot of things happen in hospitals, quietly, without drama, as if the body simply decided it was ready. His breathing had been improving for 2 days. His brain pressure had come down. The doctors had slowly reduced his sedation. And then, one morning, his eyes opened. He looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he turned his head slightly and saw Commander Delaney sitting in the chair beside his bed. She had the night shift again. She noticed him looking at her, and she leaned forward. She told him where he was. She told him he was safe. She told him his vitals were good, and that his team had been notified, and that people who cared about him knew he was awake. She spoke slowly and simply, the way medical people speak to someone who has just come back from a very long way away. He blinked a few times. He did not speak yet. The ventilator had only been removed the day before, and his throat was still raw. But he looked at her with an expression that said he understood, that he was grateful, that he knew, somehow, even without being told, that the woman sitting in that chair beside him was the reason he was still in the room. Over the following weeks, as he recovered, the story came out piece by piece. The doctors told him what had happened medically. His commanding officer told him about the FBI. A fellow nurse on the ward, not Delaney herself, told him about the 3 a.m. visit, the court order, the agents moving toward his bay, and the head nurse who had drawn her weapon and stood between them and him and simply refused to move. He was quiet for a long time after hearing that. He asked to see her. She came during one of her shifts. She sat in the same chair. He was sitting up in bed now, which felt like a miracle given what he had looked like 9 days earlier. He told her he had heard what she did. He told her that in his line of work, people talked a lot about having each other's back. On the battlefield, in the field, in dangerous places. He said he had never really thought about what it meant for someone in a hospital to have your back. He said he was thinking about it now. He tried to thank her properly. He started to say something about what she had risked, what she had done, what it meant. She waved it off. She told him it was her job. He looked at her for a moment, and then he said it plainly, the way someone says something when they mean it all the way down, that it was more than that. He said that what she did was not just a job, it was a choice. She chose to stand there. She chose to stay. She could have stepped aside and let the paperwork win, and told herself she had no choice. But she did not do that. She made a decision at 3 in the morning in a quiet hospital ward that nobody outside that room would ever fully know about, and that decision was the reason he was sitting up in bed and talking to her right now. Commander Delaney looked at him for a moment. Then she gave a small nod. She said she was glad he was doing better. She said she would check on him again during her next shift. She stood up, smoothed her uniform, and walked back out to the nurses' station. There is a type of courage that people do not write many songs about. It is not the kind that involves running toward gunfire or jumping on grenades. It is quieter than that. It is the kind that shows up in the middle of the night when someone with a badge and a court order walks through your door and tells you to step aside. It is the kind that looks at authority and says, not out of ego, not out of stubbornness, but out of something simple and deep and very hard to shake, that this is not happening. Not here, not tonight, not to this person. Commander Delaney never gave interviews about that night. She never talked about it publicly. She went back to her shifts, her charts, her cold cups of tea, her ward full of people who needed her. She did her job the next day, and the day after that, the same way she had always done it. But somewhere out there is a Navy SEAL who is alive today, walking, working, living. Because at 3:17 in the morning, on a quiet ward in a naval hospital, a woman who had taken an oath to protect her patients decided that the oath meant something, and when the moment came to prove it, she stood up, and she did not move. True real-life story.